Um, Hi. I'm going to talk about the the brief history of racism and gun control. Gun control laws have always been racially biased. Slaves originally were banned from owning guns in Virginia. The Second Amendment applied to slaves just as the Declaration of Independence applied to slaves as well, which means they didn't. After being emancipated as a result of the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, Southern states passed laws known as Black Codes, which disarmed and economically disabled African Americans in order to sustain enforcing white supremacy. The Black Codes were toothless without enforcement, so to enforce the laws, racists began to form posses that would go out at night in large groups, generally wearing disguises, and terrorize black homes, seizing every gun that they could find. Eventually, the groups became the infamous Ku Klux Klan, which we are all aware of today. The NRA, which also formed in the aftermath of the Civil War, similarly to the Black Codes, often advocated for the same policies as the KKK in the 20s and 30s. One of the first pieces of legislation that the NRA supported was called the Union Firearms Act in 1930. One of its provisions stated that no one could carry a concealed handgun in public without a permit from the local police. Another provision laid out the requirements for obtaining the permit, stating that they would be granted only to suitable persons with a proper reason for carrying a firearm. The act was drafted by the NRA and enforced by the KKK. This was the law that allowed for the police to reject Martin Luther King from getting a permit for a gun after his home was firebombed. And I'd say that that's a pretty proper reason for carrying a firearm. Then came the violent and tumultuous civil rights era. Black nationalists and white supremacists clashed on many occasions. The Black Panther Party, whose members carried weapons to guard against police brutality, held an armed protest in California in 1967. As a response, Ronald Reagan, the governor of California at the time, signed the Mulford Act, which prohibited the open carry of weapons. The act was supported by the NRA. When the Panthers sent a contingent to the state capitol building, they were immediately unarmed and escorted out of the chamber 30 minutes later. However, Reagan described it as though the Black Panthers had invaded the legislative chambers in the Capitol with loaded shotguns and held the gentlemen under the muzzles of the guns for a couple of hours, which is a blatant lie. As a side note, the Mulford Act is still in the books today. In the following year, Nixon passed the Gun Control Act in 1968, which banned a certain type of cheaply made handgun often confiscated in minority communities called Saturday Night Specials. Although it was never stated explicitly, the racist underpinnings of the act were blatantly obvious. Another NRA-backed doctrine is the Stand Your Ground laws, which started in Florida in 2005 and are currently in effect in 24 states. It allows for lethal self-defense wherever one reasonably fears death or injury in the hands of another person. A 2012 study showed that 34% of white-on-black homicides are deemed justifiable through these laws. For black-on-black homicides, it was 11%. For white-on-white, it was 8%. However, the percentage of black-on-white homicides that are justified is 3%. As Caroline O. from Art Digital Media says, the NRA deceptively cherry-picks statistics and anecdotes that fit its narrative in an attempt to make these laws look more appealing to those who stand to lose the most from them. And when confronted by the deeply deadly realities of policies like Stand Your Ground, the typical response of the NRA is deafening silence. Another point I'd like to make is shooter bias towards blacks is prevalent in our society, especially among police. I can name countless examples of instances of police brutality towards African Americans in the past decades. The famous Michael Brown in 2014, who was shot at least 6 times, 4 in the right arm and 2 in the head, and he was completely unarmed. Philando Castile in 2016, he was armed, but he warned the police that he was legally armed, and as he was reaching for his license and registration, he was shot out 7 times. 5 hit him and 2 in the heart. Tamir Rice, 12 years old, he was carrying a toy gun in the park and was shot dead. One you haven't heard of probably, Amadou Diallo in 1999. The state police mistakenly thought he had a weapon and he was shot 41 times, 19 landed on him. Alton Sterling, Trayvon Martin, John Crawford, Jermaine McBain, Kendrick McDade. So many examples. Stephen Clark, 2 weeks ago, he was shot in his own backyard, only carrying a cell phone in Sacramento. The final point that I'd like to make is there's a common stereotype that black people, specifically black men, are more dangerous than their white counterparts. 63% of mass shootings since 1900 are committed by white men, according to Grant Dew, author of Mass Murder in the United States and History. But that's not proportional to the population. White men only make up 31% of the population. So perhaps the stereotype is wrong, and the question we need to be asking is, who's the dangerous group? Thank you.